Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with another Total War Warhammer video. So Creative Assembly have finally revealed the full roster for Kislev, and they were kind enough to send us the blog post in advance so we could be able to produce some videos and explain to you what is coming with them. There's a lot to discuss here as we're going to be going into detail regarding every single new unit that will be available for Kislev upon launch of Warhammer 3. So let's not waste any more time and jump right in. As you can expect, the blog post goes into a little bit of a lore tidbit regarding Kislev, but many of us are already well used to this as, well, Kislev's lore has changed but not too much. Now, before anything, we're going to look at the legendary lords, which, yes, we have gone into detail before, but there's some interesting information over here. First up, of course, we have Catherine, who is the supposed faction leader. We already know that she's a lore master of the Lore of Ice, as we've already seen her in battle, and she's got her special weapon, Frostfang, which will give her the massive explosion spell that you guys would have seen through the gameplay reveals. What is rather interesting here, though, is she's only able to ride atop warhorses or warbears. I mean, she used to be able to ride upon elks, so it's a bit strange, and there's no word about a sled either. It's a bit disappointing, I must say, in my opinion. I mean, she is the faction leader, and she's got no unique mounts. But let's move on now to Kolton. Again, another character we've already talked about in detail, so we don't have to spend too long here. Once again, he has a warhorse and a warbear, which was pretty much expected as he seems to be the legendary lord variant of that Patriarch that we've seen before. So I'm not really salty about this mount option. He's got two unique spells known as Ursun's Ward, where he is apparently an unkillable paragon of his people, and even the most mortal wounds simply power him to greater heights of ferocity as he faces down his enemies. I've not been able to play as this character just yet, but I'm assuming that he gets stronger as he takes damage. And then lastly, Man of the People. Kolton's fervor means he never lacks faithful, loyal warriors to send into battle. So I'm assuming he's going to buff up their leadership, which is perfectly fine. That's more or less what you can expect from a warrior priest type of character. But now we can start hitting all the new stuff, and we're going to start looking at the Kislev generic lords. First up is the Boyar. Ranking nobles, Boyars are powerful men and women within Kislev. They each govern specific areas of Kislev, including scores, if not hundreds, of stanitsas. My pronunciation of any Russian type of word is going to be very horrible here, so I do apologize, as well as larger towns and small cities. Especially large cities are governed by boyars of singular prestige. This is a hereditary rank, although royal edict can raise one to the position. On the battlefield, they are tough and doughty fighters, the best in Kislev. Boyars serve the people in battle as extraordinary warriors, leading their forces from the front and clashing with enemies of every kind. They are inspiring commanders and deadly foes. Okay, first off, mount options. Yep, warhorses and warbears. This is going to be a reoccurring theme, so get used to it. Second, we are told that they inspire, so I'm assuming that they'll have some buffing properties, though we aren't really told their weapon choices here. I'm very much assuming they're going to have axes of some kind, because, well, yeah, axes kind of fit well. Possibly axe and shield to make them a bit tankier, because they do look rather big and haughty. A tanking lord would work out rather well, in all honesty, as obviously the theme of Kislev is being quite defensive, so yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. Next, we'll move on to the Ice Witches, which everyone expected. Kislev has no colleges of magic. Instead, its sorcery is derived from within the Ice Court, and invariably reflects the brutal winters of Kislev. It is from this body that the Ice Witches are drawn. Their ice magic is the raw, murderous power of cold harnessed as a weapon from frozen ground that binds the foe's feet to lances of icy death. While all magic is drawn from the raging winds, there is no doubt that ice magic is the strongest when used within the borders of Kislev itself. I'm assuming that that was said in an effort to just bring in the fluff. I don't think that that's going to have any effect in game where Ice Witches will be much stronger in Kislev, because then that would be a nightmare to balance. So what we do know is that now there are two different laws of ice. the Law of Ice itself, which specializes in disrupting enemy movement and so on, and then the Law of Tempest, which is much more heavy hitting. Now, I do remember the developers telling us that both of the laws of magic here are supposed to synergize together very, very well, which works incredibly well as we do have a hero variant which we'll discuss in one sec, but first we do have to go over the mount options for the Ice Witches, which, yeah, Warhorse and Warbear again. You might remember a few weeks back I released a video saying that we might be seeing too many bears. Well, this is pretty much what I was kind of referring to, I guess, because anything that we've seen is bears, bears, and bears. Don't get me wrong, I like the aesthetic, but yeah, it's way too many bears. It would be nice to see different mount options. Let's look now towards the Frost Maidens, the first hero characters. When the Tsarina's personal attention is not required, it falls to the women of the Ice Court to represent her might instead. Since the time of the Khan Queens, there has been an Ice Court, a powerful political body devoted to preparing the noble daughters of Kislev to take on positions of power. It is from this body that the Frost Maidens, Ice Witches yet to complete their training, are drawn. Akin to an academy, the Ice Court schools the young women within its halls in matters of diplomacy, intrigue, and sorcery. So we've got a basic spellcaster hero straight from the beginning, and we have two variants, one with the Law of Ice and one with the Law of Tempest. That works very well, because you can synergize with your other Lord characters quite well with this. Again, their mount options are Warhorse and Warbear, so I mean, did we even have to be surprised? But anyway, let's move on to the Patriarch, which we've already seen in game before. The Sentinels of the Kislevite faith. Bombastic, loud, and proud of their creed, they exhort the warriors around them to acts of courage, protecting them with their power of faith. Patriarchs stride into battle, bellowing the folk songs of the Kislevite people with the cadence of battle hymns, and mighty miracles of war are wrought by their belief. Bones of long-dead Kislevite heroes are carried in the reliquary boxes, and those nearby take heart. Although whether they hold any true magical properties remains a topic of speculation. So these are a melee buffer type hero, we've already seen them in the gameplay reveal. What we are told here is that they have 4 special abilities, they act as different battle hymns in a sense, so yeah, pretty much just a Russian Slavic looking version of the Empire Battle Priest. Which means if you're used to using them in the Empire, well, you're gonna be used to using them with Kislev too, that's actually a benefit here. And their mount options, as expected, Warhorse and a Warbear. There are unfortunately no other Lord and Hero types, but I'm assuming that they're saving some stuff for future DLC, which kinda makes sense. So let's move on to the meat and potatoes, and that means, of course, the 4 units. First we have the Corsars. Corsars are the mainstay of the Kislevite armies, regiments of grizzled and hardened fighters drawn primarily from the many thousands of foresters and trappers who keep Kislev's stanitsas and cities fed. They fight with bows and axes, the traditional weapons of the Corsars, symbolizing the woodsman and the hunter. The ornate war gear is wrought to the last lifetime if well cared for. Many is the wizened old Kislevite who has handed their axe down to their grandchild, telling tales of countless marauders or chaos beasts it has slain. While Corsars fight in regiments, they are not necessarily the most disciplined of warriors, at least on the face of it. These hard-living lay folk of Kislev are fatalistic about the bitterness of warfare, drinking together by the fire at night and singing raucous anthems as they march, joking constantly at one another's expense. They wear light armor, if any at all. So what we know here is that there are 2 variants, bows and axe and bows and spear, so okay, you've got anti-large and you've already got your frontline infantry. Creative Assembly also gave some notable characteristics about this unit. They are the backbone of the Kislevite army, cheap and easy to build, so these are the first ones that you'll ever get access to. That's great, because bows at the beginning, very helpful. As with all Kislev units, they can keep their leadership in, even in the direst of circumstances. So Kislevite units are all expected to have very high leadership. This is, right, okay, I don't know how this is going to work. I'm assuming that they won't shatter so easily, which makes sense for Kislev, but maybe every unit having very high leadership might be a bit too much. And obviously, they've also discussed that early access to both bows and spears allows for a hybrid powerful army from the off. I don't remember how long range they had, but I'm assuming they'll have mid to long range at the very least. So early on, bows and spears, you're going to be able to do very basic doom stacks right from the start. That obviously depends on how much they've balanced the game in Game 3, but right now, bows and spears as a first tier unit is quite powerful. Next we have the Strelsy. The Strelsy were originally armed with Bertsche and handguns. Yeah, I've mostly mispronounced that for sure. In order that they could rest their firearm upon the crook of their polearm and thereby achieve greater accuracy. However, in an effort to get one more shot off before the enemy closed upon them, the warriors would often run out of time to effectively stow their gun and ready their bardic. Instead, the heavy gun was often simply reversed and used as a bludgeon. Eventually, Strelsy captains took the radical step of embracing the alternative approach and had their Rotors rifles modified to include axe blades on the gunstock. So what we've seen already is they're quite powerful. These are heavy gunners, but also very good at melee combat. And yes, some people said that they look a tad ridiculous, but it was actually based on a real 16th century weapon, but Creative Assembly didn't put a picture of that as to give some sort of, reference, but okay. I've used these myself when I did the gameplay reveal, and they are really powerful. Honestly, they were shooting down Warriors of Chaos without too much of a problem when we were doing the Battle of the Brass Citadel. They're going to be quite fun to use, and, they're armored and armor-piercing units. What can you go wrong with that? But let's move swiftly on to a unit that I'm really interested in, the Ice Guard. In Kislev, the voice of a woman is equal to that of a man, and the worth of a ruler is judged by the wisdom of their rule and their might in battle. Perhaps that, more than any other reason, gives rise to an unusual sisterhood known as the Ice Guard. These are the warrior elite of the Ice Court, a bodyguard for the Ice Witches, and who are imbued with the same magical power as their mistresses. They are fearsome and fearless, conditioned to put Kislev first and to face the vilest of horrors of the old world without hesitation. The Ice Guard is staffed by formidable warrior women sent to the Boyar Palace before they reach adolescence. These youths are then sorted for their aptitude for magic. Those with the gift begin a training regime that will enable them to take their place within the Ice Court, a clandestine place of intrigue and power, typically headed by the senior matriarch of the Kislevite royal family. Each weapon these women wield is imbued with ice magic, glowing with its own inner light. So we know we have two variants of this unit, one with bow and dual sword, and the other with a bow and glaive. That's awesome, as we also get told some characteristics. We can already expect them to be anti-infantry if dual wielding, and anti-large as with the glaive. But they are fearless and stout, which I'm assuming means that they will cause fear too, or just be immune to fear, and they will also have frostbite, which slows down their enemies. These will be rather interesting to use, and we're noticing a theme here within all the Kislevite roster so far, that a lot of these guys have access to ranged weapons too. They're really hammering in the whole use them as a skirmishing army, which is going to be quite interesting to play, I'm assuming. I've only been able to use, about half the roster itself, so this is going to be quite cool. Let's move on now to the Armoured Corsairs. Armoured Corsairs are full-time soldiers, either paid by the crown or simply supported by their wealthy families. As such, their time is spent entirely either training or carousing. They are dour, grim-faced killers on the battlefield, but after the battle is done, they are the most belligerent, boisterous, and hard-drinking of all the celebrants at a victory feast. Arrogance reinforced by undeniable results. These are warriors as good as an ordinary man can hope to become. They wear heavy armor above the waist and sturdy reinforced boots, though their legs are clad only in baggy trousers. Interesting. But okay, so we have two variants once again, one with pistol and axe and one with pistol and great mace. Okay, so that's a lot of ranged weapons again, though pistols of course are short range, and it's about time that we started seeing some great weapons here too, so okay, cool. I'm assuming these would be around mid-tier more or less, because yeah, not fully heavy armored I guess. And for the last of the infantry we have the Tsar Guard. regiments of hardened warriors formed of lesser nobles and veteran soldiers elevated to higher status from within the ranks of the Corsas. The Tsar Guard are formidable, durable melee troops. Originally, they were instituted to serve as the Tsar's personal retinue, and while he would invariably travel with a large warband of Tsar Guard at his back, almost every army of Kislev now boasts a regiment or two of these hardened warriors. This is because every boyar and marshal needs a steady core to their army, veteran warriors able to act as the bulwark of the Kislevite battle line. Okay, pretty interesting. I don't know what they mean by marshal there. That's capitalized and we've not seen anything there. Perhaps something for a future DLC? I don't know if they'd be hinting at that so soon. But again, we have two variants of these units, Sword and Shield and Greatsword. They're known to be quite good at melee fighting, being one of the most elite, and they are very hard to kill. They're very heavily armored, and it's stated there that they can make up for their slow speed with incredible battle capabilities. So, heavy units, we've already seen them in battle. We've only seen the Sword and Shield one though, we didn't see the Greatswords, so I can't wait to see the Greatswords. But with all that being said, we can start moving towards the cavalry, and the first one we have is the Kosovo dervishes. Much of Kislev is known as the Oblast, a huge open wilderness. It is said that one's horse is one's life when on the Oblast. This is not a joke or an old wives' tale, but rather the cold, hard truth. If a Kislevite rider is freezing, they warm their steed first. If they are thirsty, it drinks before them. Why? Because without a horse, if the hunters of the dark gods don't catch them, the motherland's wintry embrace will make an orphan of their children just as readily. Quite grim, but cool. I like that. So, notable characteristics are they can sneak up to the enemy lines for vanguard deployment, awesome, incredible speed from well-bred and cared for horses, cool, and the quintessential hit-and-run attacker, so basic skirmishing cav, which makes sense for Kislev, though I'm not sure why they're going with a Kosovite instead of, an Ungol, but we'll leave that for a future video. Instead, I like the theme. I think that a fast-moving skirmishing cavalry unit works very well. It's just a shame that we haven't seen any concept art, because some of the units are actually missing some form of art. But let's move on to the Winged Lancers. Every settlement large enough will support a rota of Kislevite Winged Lancers, a cavalry squadron of hardy, well-trained warriors who form the offensive heart of almost every Kislev army. They are also a potent psychological weapon, for at full gallop they can cause the very air to shudder and roar. Becoming a Kislev Winged Lancer takes dedication and effort, and a great deal of money to afford the thoroughbred steed, mail coat, breastplate and helm. Only skilled warriors are accepted into their ranks, for a Stanitsa can ill afford to equip layabouts, cowards, or dolts in such a manner. We've already seen these units and, well, we already know how they're going to work. They're going to be more shock cavalry, slow moving-ish, but still very powerful. Compare them more or less to the Reichsguard, maybe the Knights of the Realm. It's very easy to put them together because they'll be using very much the same weaponry and will pretty much have the same battle uses in-game. But now we move on to a big unit known as the Griffin Legion. The Griffin Legion are a standing force of highly experienced winged lancers, notable for their improved war gear as well as their prodigious skill at arms. The first loyalty of these warriors is to the throne of Kislev. They place their duty to the Queen above all other obligations. They often serve as a mercenary army for allied powers at times when Kislev is currently not fighting a war. This gives them a wealth of experience fighting different foes and ensures that their warriors can never grow lax or allow their skills to dull from lack of use. Okay, so these are supposed to be rival to the most powerful cavalry of the Southern Territories. They're supposed to be very hard-hitting and one of those elite cavalry which you'll see very, well, mid to late game more or less. They do look rather cool. I like the aesthetic. They are a tad too bulky for my liking, but then again this is concept art, so everything kind of looks a bit bulky when it comes to concepts. They aren't bear riders, and I think even Creative Assembly had to point that out just to get the meme out of the way, I guess. Because next up we have War Bear Riders. Just like the people of Kislev worship Ursun, bear god of the motherland, so too do they respect his kin, which dwell in the wildlands and forests. These are no slave beasts to be whipped or abused. Their riders honor them, and they return this honor. Only in this way can man and bear join their might to drive the hated slaves of chaos howling back into the Oblast. Okay, so bear riders, heavy cavalry, similar to the demigriffs I'd say, possibly a bit slower but much more valuable in the front line, so you wouldn't really have too much of a problem taking them up and leaving them in the front line. They should be able to do damage and keep for themselves, because, well yeah, you know, bears, big claws and all that. Okay, I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what these can do. I did use them once when it came to the battle at the Brass Citadel, but I didn't use them too much in all honesty, and obviously since the Core Knights there were actually a bit weak, it's going to be better when they can be tested out against units with, you know, proper stats. But, you know, they look cool, and that's the most important thing. Next up we have the Horse Archers. They're just called Horse Archers, this is the thing. Horse Archers are often the only elements of a Kislevite's army that the foe encounters. They patrol the Oblast constantly, ensuring roads are clear of bandits and roving enemies, and watching constantly for incursions from the north and east. Bands of Horse Archers are welcome wherever they go, for all know that they will fight ceaselessly to protect any Kislevite settlement from invaders. That said, being a horse archer is not necessarily a lofty calling. Respected but not greatly envied, except by those who long for the freedom of the open plains and cold nights beneath the starry skies. So we've already seen horse archers and how they work in, well, all Warhammers already, so we already know how they're going to work. The thing is that they are actually quite decent in melee combat, so you can use them without a problem there too, though the main focus is to be a skirmishing range unit. Okay, let's move on to the sleds, where we have two. First up we have the light war sleds. In time of winter, the armies of Kislev must still range far and wide across the brutal, snow-blasted terrain. For this reason, the Kislevite armies are often supported by war sleds, loaded with supplies, especially black powder and shot. They trail behind rotors of winged lancers or regiments of Corsar warriors. War sleds are crewed by sturdy veterans who can be trusted to stand their ground, drawn from the ranks of the Strelsy and Corsars alike. War sleds are basically chariots just pulled by bears, so they're quite decent in melee combat, though their main purpose is to fire from afar. I'm assuming here the art is due to be changed because we were told that the bears are now all white, but other than that, I mean, who doesn't like the idea of them? I kind of think that they'll act in the same way as chariots, but a lot more melee dependent? Or better yet said, a lot more capable in melee. This is further reinforced by the heavy war sleds. The heavy war sleds of Kislev are the motherland's answer to the Empire's war wagons. Oh god, why is anything comparing to that? They are beautifully carved from timbers, harvested from the great forests, and reinforced with metal scales to protect their occupants. A combination of man-catchers, poleaxes, glaives, and spears grant them deadly impact in melee combat, while handguns ensure that they can pack a punch at range. These war sleds also carry an abundance of extra shot for prolonged campaigns. Okay, so heavier versions of the light war sleds, I'm assuming that extra abundance of shot means that they might be able to replenish the ammunition of other units? I'm not too sure if I'm reading too much into this though. I'm looking forward to see how capable these things could be in melee because, you know, it says it's the answer to the Empire's war wagons, and war wagons are, yeah, you know. The Kislevite army so far is very much centered around heavy cavalry and lots of range, and in truth there's not that much more to go through, as now we're going to start looking through the monsters and beasts. First up we have the Snow Leopard. With the Tsarina at the head of the Ice Court, storms of death await for invading armies, and the beasts of Kislev stalk the forests and Oblast seeking out her foes. One such creature is the Great Saber-toothed Snow Leopard, a fierce battle cat that can be trained to protect the women of the Ice Court. Snow Leopards' natural prey are wandering herbivores, but in times of famine they have been known to consume chaos beasts, taking savage delight in chomping down a troll or a minotaur when the need arises. Bit of a lore issue here, because you can't really eat a troll or else you end up like Grom, or, well, you explode. And we have some notable characteristics here which say more than capable of taking down humongous creatures in a large enough pack, when we already know that these are single entities. They're also known as adorable snowcats, which, I mean, I was calling them battle kitties, and that's what they're going to be called for the rest of time. And they're known to be extremely fast and very capable in taking on an enemy that lags behind the enemy force. Okay, so yeah, the snow leopards are your typical hunter unit like war dogs, but as a single entity. This should be fairly interesting. I mean, they look pretty cool. The concept art makes them look a bit too cartoony for my liking, in all honesty, but we've seen how they look like in-game due to various cinematics, so there's really no need to complain about the concept art. Now let's move towards the elemental bear. Some say that Kislev is alive, a motherland which cares for its people and defends them in times of war. Outsiders call these claims old wives' tales, but those who have seen the land literally rise up and fight know better. Elemental bears are creatures of magical wrath, brought into sentience by the faith and devotion of the Kislevite people, and imbued with the spirit of the land. Massive, terrifying, and crackling with magical energy, they are a brutal force of nature rising from the earth to fight beside Kislev's children. So yeah, massive monstrous unit. They can be summoned, they're single entities, but they can also be recruited. Apparently they're supposed to be unbreakable too, which I did not notice when I played as them, but then again, I was using a lot of Strelsy and just firing into the chaos ranks. The fact is that this is actually reminiscent of very old lore. I know a lot of people don't like them, thinking that they're a bit too extra, but they do fit with the theme. But with all that being said, we have but one artillery piece, the Little Grom. Kislev is not known for massed artillery. In fact, at many points throughout its histories, the Boyars and Druzina, okay, so another thing that's been mentioned which is not in-game, we'll talk about this in another video if anything, but let's just carry on, have been expressly forbidden from maintaining their own. In the reign of Tsar Alexis, a dozen new cannons were commissioned, under the orders that their roar would drown out the hordes of chaos like the thunder of gods. The Thunderers, as they were known, made a great difference in the battles that eventually saw the legions of chaos thrown back into the northern wastes. By the time that the fighting was over, most of the 12 Thunderers were lost, but a few precious remain. These are the Little Grom, so I'm assuming that we won't be able to recruit these by standard measure, that we'll just be able to get them in a very similar way to, I don't know actually, if they will just be recruited by a right or something? Because it's only saying here that only a few precious remain, but then again, we do know that only 12 steam tanks remain, and we're able to recruit whole doom stacks of them, so I don't see a problem there. And to be honest, Kislev does need some form of artillery. They are a mobile artillery, so you can move them around without a problem, and they are decent in melee combat too, because obviously it's being pulled by bears, because, yeah, it's Kislev and bears, yeah. But from my use of it, it wasn't too bad. Again, that was only in a scenario where everything else was fairly weak, so I can't wait to see it being used properly. Now, with all that being said, you know, the roster itself seems kind of small, and there's mention of marshals and druzinas, so I don't know, are we not going to see them, or are they going to be future DLC? The roster seems like it's way too small. I don't know what they're trying to do here. Everything feels very specialized though, so it doesn't feel bad, it just feels tiny. I'm not complaining because at least it looks like they've got units for every single situation, a lot of range, some different types of weaponry too, and of course a bunch of different shock cavalry. The way I'm kind of seeing this is maybe very similar to that of High Elves mixed with Bretonnia type of playstyle, just without all the monsters and not so much chance at variety of magic, unless future DLC does change that of course, but I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see how it looks and feels when Creative Assembly start deciding to give content creators access again to be able to test it out again and like a full roster this time. But so far, I don't know, it just feels a bit small. We're going to have to wait and see, and hopefully we'll get more information soon. They do in fact tease that there's going to be another roster reveal very soon, but this is Creative Assembly, so I'm assuming we're going to have to wait a while. Only time will tell. But what do you guys think about the units so far? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and let's start a bit of a discussion. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.